I believe someone also enabled the closed captioning, so we should be all set to go here. So as I said, we are from the ARC of Northeastern Pennsylvania. We cover advocacy in 7 counties in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And that's Carbon, Monroe, Pike, Wayne County, Lackawanna, Susquehanna, and Luzerne County. So first we're going to start with the permission to evaluate and the permission to reevaluate. So you may at times see the referred to as the acronym PTE, permission to evaluate. And sometimes, you know, districts and professionals will be throwing around some acronyms, and it's sometimes assumed that you may know them. But so we try to identify them in our presentation so parents and staff become familiar. The parent can request or the school can request, you know, for the child to be evaluated. If the parent requests orally, they have 10 days to provide the permission to evaluate form. So meaning orally, you may be talking to your teacher and you feel you're concerned about your child and you'd like to have them evaluated for special education. Sure, you're just doing that. This is a conversation. If you request it in writing, which we would highly suggest, you know, to get the ball moving quicker, they have a reasonable amount of time to provide the consent form and the NORUP for you to sign for that permission to evaluate, the initial evaluation. The permission to reevaluate, which is the, you know, similarly, the acronym used is PTR. And districts are required to reevaluate every 3 years for all disabilities except for intellectual disability, which is every 2 years. A parent can request a reevaluation sooner, though, than required. So if you're concerned about something new or you're concerned about, you know, something that's come up, you can do that within less time than the 3 years or the 2 years. Again, if you request orally, it's going to take 10 calendar days for them to provide you with the form to request the evaluation. And if you do it yourself in writing, which could be an email or a written note or something like that, then they need to get to you that consent form, move right ahead with that process in a reasonable amount of time. Sometimes families come to us for an advocacy and they ask us for, like, what do they say, or are they not sure how to request? And it could be as simple as, we just put an example here, but my child is having difficulty in all academic areas, and I would like them to receive a full comprehensive evaluation in all areas of concern, and then you would include the areas that you're concerned about. That would be like a pretty synopsis of, you know, something you could put down quickly and cover all areas. But it could be as simple as, like, you know, if you're concerned about your child's behavior, you're falling behind in math, you know, just, or, you know, I just really feel like they need to be evaluated for special education. And you can write that and send it into the school. And you can send it to the teacher, you could send it, you know, to an administrator as well. So this is the evaluation or reevaluation request forms. It serves as the written request. So that form is if it serves as the written request. So that's only, you're only going to get this form if you request something orally, like if you just request it in a conversation. So they're still going to need that permission to evaluate. It should include the date on this form. It should include the date the request was made and to whom it was made on this form. It should be given to you within 10 days, and you need to sign it and return it promptly. And you're going to fill in all the information, including the name, address, child's name, your date, and the concerns on this form. If the LEA, which is your school district responsible for your child, local education agency agrees, they will send prior written notice and the request for consent form. If they disagree, they will still send that, and it'll include the reasons why they're denying your request for, and they'll send in a copy of the procedural safeguard, so how you can go about exercising your rights if you do disagree. So that form was included. You know, those request forms were included. And if you sent in a written request, it may like we said, only this is if you did an oral request. So if not, it's going to completely bypass this if you wrote an email in, and you're going to go right to the next form, which we're going to discuss. So the prior written notice consent form serves as the permission. This is for an initial evaluation. So there's some differing things here depending on if it's initial evaluation versus a reevaluation. So this is the permission to evaluate consent form that you were given a copy of. So if you get this, is proposing to conduct the evaluation, and it's going to need the signature of the parent for this initial evaluation. And once the clock will start when your school receives the form back. So it's very important that you sign the form and return it in a timely manner. And it's on this form, it's going to explain why they are conducting the evaluation. So you're going to have your concern should be listed there, or the school district's concern should be listed on this form. Whatever, was listed as the reasons why. There may be data shown here, such as academic or behavior that may be provided, as well as any prior assessments that were done may be included in here. They can include in here, say, for example, in this section, classroom observations, progress monitoring, some school reports and benchmarks, et cetera. So that's some data that will be considered as part of the evaluation. And other factors, that box in there on that report that says other factors, it can list something as, due to a recent uptick in behavioral concerns, due to continued difficulty in the math curriculum, it may list a factor of why the evaluations are being requested here and given permission for it. And then it might list other options, and it might list what was tried, what was considered, but what is not working. So we tried this small group with another child, and we tried the school-wide positive behavior plan, and it didn't work. It may list some other options that were considered first. And also it should include all areas of concern and what the students should be tested on and how they will be tested. So it's going to have the related reasons and the concerns. It should be administered in a language that the family understands, and should be detailed so that it's easy for you to read through. And the testing tools should be listed and who's going to be the people testing, because it really needs to be trained and knowledgeable personnel in that field that should be conducting the testing. Recently, this has literally just happened after we had the presentation created. So we added in a slight change that's happening now, hot off the press. There's changes to 2 forms. They used to be grouped into one form, which we're going to discuss, but now they're going to be doing this as 2 separate forms. So that's the prior written notice and the request for consent for reevaluations. So initial evaluations that we discussed now is the same, but the reevaluation is going to be slightly different. So I just pulled this right off the Patent website, and they do have a video explaining, which you can go out onto the YouTube channel for Patent and see. I'm not going to go through that today, but the prior written notice for reevaluation and request for consent has been separated into 2 forms. The prior written notice for a reevaluation form and the request for consent reevaluation form. And they're saying it's to ensure LEAs provide parents with prior written notice and they obtain the parents' consent at the proper times during the process in accordance with the regulations from IDEA. So they're trying to make it more concise. So if the child's due for a reevaluation before that 3-year mark or that 2-year mark, that they're letting the parent know that they're conducting this reevaluation, and you don't have to sign anything at that point. But then if they're going to do some further testing and look at things a little closer, then you're going to be signing that consent form. They're trying to make things, they say, a little bit clearer for parents and the staff at the school, and to also maintain that they're in those timeline regulations. So it's going to be similar to the confined forms we're going to talk about today, except it's going to be separated into 2 separate forms instead of all lumped into one. We have copies of those new forms, and they're supposed to go into effect November 1st. You may see some districts might be already using them now, so you may come across them. So we wanted to bring that up, even though it's not until November 1st. And again, we can send copies of those new forms, so you have those as well. And it's a little daunting and a little overwhelming, but with all these different forms and all the different things. But hopefully with the guidance of the presentation covering each area, it'll be a little bit more clearer. So the prior written notice / consent form is for a reevaluation, and it serves as that permission. So again, if you wrote in and it's a regular reevaluation the district has to do under compliance, or if it's something that you're requesting because you're concerned and you want your child reevaluated in an additional time span, or you want them to take a closer look at something that they're having services in, but you want to look a little closer at it. So in this reevaluation form, it's going to show the review of existing data. And that's information collected prior to the evaluation process. Again, the class testing, the benchmarks, and the observations. And now they're saying we have to collect additional information. So I think that's sort of what the difference is between the two other forms will be. So when they need to collect additional information and they need your permission to reevaluate either by the district or parent request, that should be checked here on this form. And again, the clock starts when the school receives the form back. Parental input forms can also be sent with this permission to reevaluate consent form. So you may get additional parent input forms that are going to go along with the testing. So it's really important to make sure you take some time to fill those forms out. At times you may request a reevaluation, say, speech, occupational therapy, couple different areas of cognitive testing, and the school may agree to some areas, but not others. And that's a possibility that we just wanted to highlight. But on this form, it'll say, why is additional evaluations needed? And this should really be filled out clearly. Does the child still in need of special education and related services? So they may be doing this evaluation to see if they even still qualify. Do they still meet the criteria of that disability, or is there another disability that's suspected? So if, for example, your child meets the criteria for autism a couple years ago, and now you're more concerned, it's more apparent that they may have an intellectual disability. So are they going to qualify under both areas? And then also to update present levels of academic and functional achievement, which is a really important reason for an evaluation, especially at different times in the child is moving into high school or more difficult curriculum, or they're going to be transitioning to adult programming, that type of thing. It's going to discuss data that's already collected. So again, that progress monitoring, that behavioral data, anything else listed in that area, any other factors, any other options, and what's to be assessed and how and who, similar to the original permission to evaluate. Those same areas should be filled in. Days to remember. So, some reports and different things with regulations go on the calendar year, and others go on school days. So it's important to understand and know what's what. So school days are when school is in session. So that's sort of self-explanatory, but calendar days are only counted during the school year. So during the school year, calendar days are every day: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But once the summer starts, then it stops the clock. So if you sign paperwork and your child and started the process 60 days for an evaluation, June 10th or June 1st, say, for example, June 1st, and school gets out June 15th, well, then 15 days are in, and then you're off for the summer, and then school went back September 5th. So September 5th is when the clock starts again, and you have day 16, and then so forth, 17, 18, 19. Sometimes schools will do evaluations during the summer just because, sometimes staff or personnel, or they're backlogged and they're bringing in staff to do these evaluations during the summer. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop. It's just regulation purposes. It doesn't normally count. A reasonable amount of time is referenced a lot in the timelines and the regulations, and it's known to be 10 calendar days, even though it's not written out. It's usually that's a reasonable amount of time. Again, 60 days as the calendar days to complete an evaluation or reevaluation from the date the school received those signed permissions. So they have 60 days to complete it. And Mandy's mentioned in some of our other trainings before, you really want to get those forms in and get them signed and get that clock ticking, because 60 days is longer than a marking period, and there's only a finite number of times, days and stuff that you're going to be in school. So it's really important to stay on top of the dates and the timelines and get the paperwork in. If the school schedules a meeting to go over your reports once they're completed, we recommend, and it's not required, but it's a good practice, to ask for the report in advance to the meeting to review it. So you can just get your eyes on it, glance at it. There's a lot of information there that can be confusing, even for people that are trained. A lot of testing and lingo and things like that the average person has trouble understanding. So if something you can highlight it and look through your report ahead of time in advance of that meeting, or you can ask for a meeting after you get the report. But you must get the report for 30 days prior to the IEP meeting unless you waive that. So, if you get the report and you go to a meeting and they go over the report and they make it, oh, we're just going to turn this right into the IEP meeting, they have to have a waiver signed for that because you really need time to digest and be able to look through there and ask any questions and ask any follow-ups and make sure that all the people that conducted the testing are available to answer any questions you might have. And you can proceed with the reevaluation after reasonable attempts for the permission have been made. So the district, if they're trying to attempt to let you know, they need this, and this is where I think sort of the consent comes in, where you don't have to sign it. They're letting you know they have to reevaluate. And if you're not signing those permissions and they document the attempts made, then they could just move forward with reevaluating the child. I actually had this as a case here at the ARC. The parent was concerned that they took the kid in and did some testing, but the parent was not getting back to them. The child was about to graduate, and the school wanted to have him, reevaluated and complete all the exit paperwork, and so they just went ahead and went forward with that. So I know we all get bogged down by the paperwork and all the requests coming in. We all get it here at the ARC as advocates because we're also parents of students with disabilities. So we understand how difficult it could be sometimes to get through everything, and emotionally and time-wise. Next, we're going to briefly touch on the NOREP. So when you get that consent form giving permission, there's going to be some things on there that you want to double check and fill out. And the NOREP is the Notice of Recommended Educational Placement. And anytime there's any changes to their education, FAPE, free and appropriate public education, which would include reevaluations and evaluations, it will get this form. And it's giving notice that these things are going to take place. And our next training is going to be completely on the NOREP and what it can be used for, because it's often underutilized. So just like a little plug for our next session. But on your NOREP, you want to double check that the name, and it's funny, sometimes this stuff is incorrect. And you want to make sure your child's name is correct, your address is correct, the dates are correct. I've seen really inaccurate dates a lot of times in NOREP, back dates and the wrong dates that weren't correct. Phone numbers, some of these schools, you send the forms in with the updated phone numbers and it gets updated in one system, but maybe not in the other system. Or if the parent has, there's two different parents involved and you want to make sure all that's listed. You're going to want to look and make sure the signature, that you sign it, and is everything listed on there as you understand it, in terms of what they agree to evaluate on. If not, you can certainly write on the NOREP if something's missing, or you can request an updated copy. If something is missing, you can go back and say, I'm sorry, but I believe we agreed to this. Also, the child being tested for occupational therapy and it's not listed. So certainly double check all that. And then you have three options. You consent to the reevaluation, you do not consent, or you'd like to have an informal meeting just to discuss it further. And if you do not consent, then you're going to have to decide. Do you want to have another meeting, or do you want to go to mediation or due process about this situation? So those are, again, for another training, but just to highlight that you will get this form and you will have to make those decisions. You can't just not sign. Not signing does not mean you disagree. You have to sign. And again, return that as soon as possible. Here are some reevaluation reminders. So now at the beginning of the school year, sometimes, this is when you're starting to see, you're concerned about your child. There's another issue that's coming up, or you're restarting the reevaluation process that started last year. So after these initial first weeks of school, you might be delving into this process. So here's some reminders. In your request, put all areas you're concerned about and you would like your child evaluated for. Make sure it encompasses all the areas, because if you leave something out and you sign that permission to evaluate and something's left out and you don't notice, oh, I didn't notice we didn't have OT on here, or now I'm concerned about OT and I want to add that. Well, they may say, well, we have to issue another permission to evaluate, and then you're restarting the clock with this new permission to evaluate. So you want to double check it. Some examples that you're concerned about could be a number of different things. It doesn't just mean like if your kid gets good grades, like they don't need to be evaluated special education, or, let's just wait and see. So examples could be, speech and language, Cognitive testing, like you like to see some cognitive testing with their IQ. Adaptive functioning, you like to see how they're doing with their activities of daily living skills. You're concerned about emotional concerns and anxiety. These are all different examples that you could list when you're requesting. Remember, screening, again, is not an evaluation, and it doesn't need permission, so they may be doing some screenings and tests, sort of, not evaluations, but tests or things that are done for all students, and it doesn't mean that you need to give permission for that. You're not required to try other programs or interventions or other ways of, or a 504 even first before requesting or receiving an evaluation for special education. You have the right to request that at any time. The district could refuse, though, to evaluate, so that is always an option too, but you don't have to do like a wait and see approach. They can still continue to get those interventions while the process is ongoing. Either way, the NORP should be provided, and you may exercise those procedural safeguards where, you could call this Office of Dispute Resolution and ask for some information on how to handle this moving forward. And again, make sure all areas are listed to avoid having to restart that clock. So here's some things, don't forget, check these off. Does this evaluation reevaluation form include who's conducting the testing? So it should include, and who is going to be responsible for testing, a school psychologist or speech and language pathologist. Does it include the types of testing? So it shouldn't just have like academic benchmarks. We're going to be looking at, what's been tracked in school, or what the testing has shown at the beginning of the year, the end of the year, middle of the year. But it should list the testing that is used as part of this comprehensive evaluation that's been requested. So they're going to be doing, there's a whole different list of examples of different tests that could be used for, say, cognitive functioning, adaptive functioning, autism rating scales, all different types of testing. So if you're looking at academic achievement, if you're looking at developmental testing or sensory profiles even, or an FBA, a functional behavior assessment, any kind of speech and language type assessments, they should be listed. And it should list who's going to be doing those testing and what testing is going to be proposed to the child. And does this form include all areas of concern? Make sure all your areas are listed. Make note if sometimes it may just say a record review, and that is under the regulations. They're up for their third year reevaluation, and they just look at the benchmarks, the assessments, the prior testing, their present levels, the different things like that, feedback from the teachers, maybe some parent input forms, or it's just a record review, and you're thinking that they're getting a full-blown comprehensive, and there's a difference there. So sometimes districts just do these record reviews for years and years and years, and the parent doesn't even realize. So if you see the record review or you see something on there that you want to be a little more comprehensive, then certainly speak up with your school officials, especially when it's times like transition, like if your child's leaving, going to stay in school till 21, or they're going to be accessing governmental programs such as Office of Developmental Program waivers, Social Security, OVR. You're going to want to make sure they've had some cognitive and adaptive functioning tests, close to the 18 years old, 16, 17, when you're going to apply. If they have emerging skills or they've lost skills recently, you might want to have that more comprehensive testing done. If prior testing couldn't be validated, like say they weren't able to complete an IQ test or something when they were young, like when they first entered school, and now they're 12, 13, there's a big difference then. So you want to make sure they're getting that more than just a record review at that point. Remember, parental input is important. You are an equal member of the IEP team. You know your child the best, and don't hold back. List all your concerns and keep those lines of communication open. You may write down again on the form any additional information and your understanding of what was proposed, and please make a copy. If you don't have access to a copy machine, you can take a photo, you can scan it on your phone. You can even ask the school to please send you back a copy. You're entitled to your educational records. But again, sign it and return it promptly. Right now, we will have time again for any questions. We're trying to keep these, I know it's a lot of information, but we're trying to keep them brief. We know everybody's time is valuable. We thank you for participating and joining us today. There's lots of wonderful resources out there, Office of Dispute Resolution, the Peel Center, like our local ARC or ARC of PA, and the Pennsylvania Patent Technical Training Assistance. They're all great resources for families and able to help you with any questions. And again, thank you for joining us, and we will open it now to any questions. You can certainly, I'm going to put our information up on the next slide.